it comes from different generations of our movement. It also comes from different generations of our youth movement. I think the comrades who are sitting here, in fact, a person who's not been introduced is Comrade Abner himself, is the only person who's sitting amongst us who managed to meet John Ung Kim, the young leader in DPRK in North Korea. Is the one who addressed more than 500,000 people standing in salutation. It was Comrade Abner Musas, was our internationalist in the leadership of the youth league. In fact, we were supposed to be the one, Comrade Supra, the Minister of International Relations. If we're more serious about international work, because he speaks all the languages. He speaks Swahili. He understands, if we're saying chica bonita, muchacha, he understands Spanish, he understands all the languages which we normally speak when we interact with the international community. No, thank you very much, Comrade Abner. Let me also greet the members of the media who are also here, also all other comrades, including my family, Comrade Supra, Comrade Ayanda. There's the last born at home, Utato Mnenca, the last born, Bhagabotata. Ukona has arrived from yesterday, also is based in Pretoria. He's also part of the National Defense Force. Because at home we've got the military background. When all other options they've run out, there's always a last option. We come from that background. I think what we have really will just highlight before I raise whatever I want to raise. It is important to give more a context of our revolution, because sometimes people, they do not know where we come from, how also the movement have evolved over time. So we are part of the ANC not on the basis that we decided to join the ANC, or we love the ANC, or we do not love the ANC. What we love, comrade, is the South African Revolution, because Africans in particular, they were forced by material conditions to fight with the system, especially the last system, the system of apartheid. It was not their choice, it was not their own choosing, it was not their own making. They were forced by material conditions. You remember, after the discovery of gold in South Africa, people were forced to move from rural areas and other parts in the country to go to industrial centers, others to Joburg, others to PE, others to Gauteng, others to Bloemfontein, to all centers. They were forced by material conditions. Whilst our people at that time, they were also waging serious wars of resistance. You remember in the Eastern Cape, our people fought almost 9 wars. In KwaZulu-Natal, I remember the last rebellion, which was called Bambata. Almost in all provinces. About Comrade Pat, where he comes from, in Limpopo, they fought Umakado, also in that part of the world. We're simply saying our people, they fought wars of resistance. So when they were resistant, they were fighting against the settlers, those who have taken our land. Our people, they wanted to protect the land, they wanted to protect the natural resources. That's why our own people fought. But on a number of occasions, were defeated in those wars because we were fighting as separate troops, we were fighting as tribes. But later, young intellectuals at that time decided to come together and form the ANC, working with traditional leaders. If you remember, Inkosi Abatembu, the ones from Lesotho, from Zambia, from Zimbabwe, from all corners, when the ANC was formed by Walter Khubusana. Because I always put at this point, because history must never be distorted. A person who was at the forefront, it was Walter Khubusana in 1909, when the ANC was then formed in Bloemfontein. The conference where we normally put more emphasis, the one of 1912, it was the second conference of the ANC, where John Langalibalele Dube was elected. It was not the first conference. The first conference, it was 1909. I speak also as a historian. I'm not just only a comrade. I'm also a historian. I take the South African history and the world history seriously. It was the second conference. But it was the second conference, Comrade Des, when Comrade Langalibalele Dube was elected, on the basis that in the Eastern Cape there were two dominant factions. A faction which was led by Walter Khubusana, the other one was led by Jabav, where there were politics of Xhosas and Fingus. Because if you come to the Eastern Cape, whilst you will say a language which is spoken, which is dominant, is Xhosa, but when you come to the province, you get different nations. In terms of the dynamics, it always comes out to those dynamics. And then Dube was then elected as a compromise president. Even when he died, he was no longer a member of the ANC. People, they don't know that history, because sometimes in history we like the best parts. We don't like the other parts. But if you read that history of the ANC, all the leaders, what we're doing at that time, we're doing what was called deputations. People, they used to travel from there straight to the Queen in England. A letter will be written. They will stay there for 3 months, waiting to see the Queen. When the Queen is happy in England, the Queen will come out and take the letter, and then they will wait for the Queen to write a reply. They will come back to South Africa. Because the founders, they were not more about the total change. It was about the accommodation, the way of life. People, they wanted to sit on the dinner table, use fork and knife. There are a number of factors which influenced the ANC founders. Once it was a question of land, others, it was not about land. It was about to be accommodated. Because if you read one of the books which were written by Moletsi Mbeki, The Architects of Poverty, you follow the story of Makab Kunene, the Natal businessman. When after the ANC was formed, and then later after the ANC there was a formation of the Youth League in 1944. When the Youth League was radical, the likes of Makab Kunene, they said, no, we're happy with the way of life in South Africa. If there are these radical changes, we're open to live and join and go to Britain, because we do not want any change in terms of the way of life. I'm raising this thing because I will make a point earlier about why other black, especially Africans in particular, they are happy with the status quo. It's how the ANC evolved. The formation of the ANC was saying it was a turning point in our liberation struggle. Also, after the formation of the ANC, in 1952 Defiance Campaign, in political terms, we always say it was a turning point when Mandela was a chief volunteer. And then after the Defiance Campaign, you had also a turning point of the formation of Umkhonto. That's why we'll have comrades like Des Van Rooyen, because it's part of the MKMVA. Is that period where Umkhonto was then formed is also a turning point in terms of generations. You will also have a turning point of 1976. There are a number of young people who are here. 1976, those were in exile. Others, they were even called June 16 detachments. Those who left the country who joined the movement outside, because it was a turning point, it was a generation. After 1976, we had a generation of 1985, where Oliver Tambo spoke through Radio Freedom, and then he made a clarion call to young people that they must make South Africa ungovernable. And then it was also a turning point. We had a period where we reached what was called in South Africa a state of equilibrium. That's why we managed to go to negotiations. But when we went to negotiations as a country, there were also other material factors all over the world. If you go to the Western countries, the likes of Margaret Thatcher, they were no longer holding. There was a change. If you remember the challenges of the Soviet Union, when there was a collapse, there was also a change at that fight. And then it forced the apartheid system, because it was no longer operating. It was very weak. They were collapsing because they could no longer trade with the international world based on their isolations. And then we went to negotiations up to a level where we received what was our political breakthrough of 1994. But when we received the political breakthrough of 1994, the biggest limitation which we had as Africans, I think which we must acknowledge as liberation movements, especially the ANC, there was not even a singly liberated territory in South Africa. There was no area where we could say, when we're negotiating, this area is liberated. There was no area which was liberated. When we negotiated, yes, once apartheid was weak, but they were also not that weak in terms of negotiations. We made compromises. The movement made compromises. But the compromises which were made, the biggest mistake which we always make as a current generation is to blame that generation of Nelson Mandela, to say they should have not made those compromises. It was difficult. A person like me, Comrade Abner, who comes, Comrade Silitz, from jail, I understand why Mandela made those compromises. If we were outside dancing, you will never understand. It is difficult in prison just to sleep a second day. It is difficult for Mandela and his own generation to stay 25 years, 27 years, and then you think when they come back, they were not going to make those compromises. They were forced by the material conditions. It was not their own choice. After 1994 political breakthrough, in South Africa, it was the lull. There was no serious political activity. But we must always put it in proper perspective. What do we mean by a political breakthrough? What is a breakthrough? A breakthrough is like when you take a stone and then you throw a stone to that window. We are not going to break that window in totality. A certain portion in that window is going to be broken. It's what we received in 1994. It was a breakthrough. It's the breakthrough which we must be able to use. After that 1994, there was no other turning point until the turning point of 2011 of the conference of the Youth League in Gallagher Estate, where Abo Comrade Ayanda they were part of. That was the only turning point, because that conference pronounced on an important aspect of the South African economy. That is why I was saying it was a turning point. It's what we must be able to talk about. It's what we must be able to address. Because as we are sitting here, all of us, we have not addressed in South Africa the question of the economy. All the commanding heights of the South African economy, they are firmly in the hands of the white monopoly capital. We have a complicated situation in South Africa. Ngesixhosa andiyazi noba sizizidodo noba sizintoni. We have a majority of Africans who are more than 75% of the population. We have a majority of Africans and blacks in general, who constitute more than 90% of the population, but all of them, they are complaining about the 10% of the population, that, you know, whites, they control the economy. Whites, they own everything, who are unemployed because of this mall. It is a situation you can go all over the world. It's only in South Africa where we have a majority complaining about the minority. It is only in South Africa where we have people who are complaining about racism. Majority, they are saying, no, we can sit here, one white person comes there, and then we are saying we are complaining about racism. All of us in this table are saying, no, we have been racial abused. You have that situation. That situation needs us to be able to think, why the majority? Yes, we understand the arrival of Jan van Riebeeck in 1652. All there was of resistance. We can even interrogate why we were defeated in all those wars, but we are majority. Until today, we are still being defeated. As the generation, what we are putting forward is to say it is high time now that we must be able to march and not blame the generation of Mandela, of Oliver Tambo, a generation of John Dube, a generation of the leaders who came before us. It's our responsibility to be able to take this country forward. When we are taking the country forward, we must be able to define a new path. But this path which we must be able to define, we are part of the ANC, we are members of the ANC. It is a path where the ANC must be forced to agree, where it must be forced to adopt. Because we need to change the ANC, like the generation of 1944. The generation of Xolisi Majombos, of Anton Lembede, came with a program of action in 1948. They then forced the ANC. That is why it even changed the president of the ANC at that time. It brought Moroka from the shipping. When Moroka was approached by the Youth League, was drinking in the shipping, and then the Youth League approached Moroka and said, we want you to be the president of the ANC. It's what we need. Because in South Africa, as we speak today, in terms of our own experience, 20 million of South Africans are unemployed. More than 38% of South Africans are unemployed. In that number, 62% is those young people who are between the age of 14 and 35. Those who are 55 in terms of age, who are 50 in terms of age, they have no hope that they will ever get employment. But what we've witnessed since the political breakthrough of 1994 is that those who are part of the apartheid system, they've accumulated more wealth today. They are richer. If you go to Stellenbosch, those who are in their vineyards, they will tell you that were poorer before 1994 were richer after 1994. That is the experience. It's what we need to do. We need to change the South African situation. We need the comrades who are sitting here, even comrades who are here, they must be able to provide leadership. We must be able to change the South African situation. Because we cannot have the majority of Africans in particular and blacks in general, where they are beggars in their own land of birth. If you drive in Summerstrand, you will drive in Sandton. Our people, they are standing on the robots. They are standing on the street corners. They are beggars in their own land of birth. The economy in this country, it is controlled by the tiny minority. As you came here, when you take a shower or you take a bath in the morning, the soap which you use, it comes from them, from Unilever. The toothbrush, the toothpaste you use in the morning, it comes from them. They own the cartels. Every sector of our economy, it is owned by them. It's what we must be able to change. As we are sitting here, even if we can audit the man which was in our own position of COVID-19, I'm not talking about, and then what will be reported in the media. No, let's arrest a person was involved in COVID-19, because that is a diversion. We are being diverted. If the billions which were set aside, 98% of that money is in the white hands. All the corporations which have been subsidized, they are white-owned. They are not black-owned. We will never transform the South African economy if we continue with the status quo, if we continue with the same pace. What we need, it is a generational takeover. You need a change in the leadership of the ANC. Why we are saying is a change. The other leadership, Comrade Supra of the ANC, it is schooled in the deputations. They have no other responsibility, Comrade Rachitanga, is to deputize, is to go to the king. As we are sitting here in the Eastern Cape, if you go next to City Hall, the whole library is under the British. You go the whole Port Alfred, all the pockets of lands, they're under the British. You go to Mpumalanga, all the pockets of lands, they're under the British, because we are the only country which we never received our independence. I don't know whether there's anyone who knows our Independent Day, where there was a break from the British. There was never a break. It was the Union of 1910, after the Anglo-Boer War. When the Union was formed, we were put outside. Then 1994, it was just a breakthrough. Every president who's elected in South Africa, it was Mandela must go to the Queen, it was President Mbeki to the Queen, President Zuma to the Queen, President Cyril Ramaphosa to the Queen. It tells you about we're a British satellite. In order for us to move away from being a British satellite, you need a new generation which must fight for the total control of South Africa, where we can be able to have a full ownership of our country, where we can be able to preside over the affairs of our country without any interruptions. Because we'll never manage the affairs of the country. That's the program which we are saying we must be able to do, must be able to change the country. I know as you are sitting here, you'll be made to watch comedies. You'll become comedians. You must watch a Zondo Commission. Whilst the state, the money is being used wrongly. We've got people who are unemployed, but we've got a commission which is sitting for 3 years. If you have a case against Abner, go to a police station and open a case. You don't need a commission for a case of corruption. All of us must fight corruption. As we're sitting here, we must fight corruption. If you have a case against Lungisa, go to Human Police Station and open a case and table evidence. You don't need a commission where people they can sit in a television close to a 1 billion. Is going to be is being spent once our people they are swimming in poverty. That is why we're saying what we need to do as we move forward, we must make that change. To make that change, as we're sitting here, we're going to go village by village, town by town, city by city, preparing for a biggest conference of all South Africans. It's either they will gather in Bloemfontein or they will gather in Johannesburg. The leadership will decide. Where we'll table a program of action, of taking back our country, of having our Independence Day, of taking the economy in this country. We are saying when we go to villages, we'll want representatives from villages, because it must happen before the conference of the ANC, before the NGs of the ANC, as this generation must be able to table in the NGs of the ANC, in the conference of the ANC and say, it's what